This next question is one as well, or next sort of segment to transition to is one that I know is also of great interest to the research community, and that is the new language in the Uniform Guidance on Procurement Standards. This is an area where we've gotten a lot of questions, where the Uniform Guidance, of course, took many circulars and brought them together into one consistent uniform set of guidance, with some exceptions where there needed to be for different entities. But the procurement standards was one of those areas where we brought together language historically from A102 and A110, and the COFAR, looking at that, really thought there was a lot of value in the A102 language in terms of setting up accountability and consistency, and so applied a lot of that language more broadly. And while there aren't many significant policy changes, there are some, and there's a lot of new language that's new to the A110 folks. So I want to turn it back over to Kim and see what questions you may have about that.
Thanks again. And now, I don't have the auditors. I have Gil Tran, who knows everything, and
I'm still
Tasha Tasha is going to help me, but I forgot you're an auditor for the moment.
Okay.
So we got to the uniform guidance. We had the day after the holidays to read through it, and I get to the procurement section, and I'm shocked. So I think I wasn't alone with that. And the reason we were shocked on the university side, and if I could also on the nonprofit side, is because these look very different from Circular A110. You know, we all have the charts that compare them. A110 was, in fact, quite brief on this topic. We found that very approachable. But it does appear that there is a great deal of emphasis on procurement methodology. There are very specific approaches laid out. And it made us feel almost as though we had somehow been a naughty child. And then we were thrust under new rules so that we would behave better. Was this intended to be addressing behavior that was inappropriate?
I think I'm going to repeat what Victoria has said. You know, the intention is not to, that this is, by the way, I'm Gilbert Tran. I'm with the Office of Financial Management. I work for Dave and Beth. Dave's still here. No, the intention there, as Victoria kind of briefs on the background, is not, this is a problem area that needs to be addressed. The issue here is more, we have now, when we combine the two circular, A110 and the common rule, we look at particularly in the procurement areas, and we see that you know, the A102 common rule have more prescriptive requirement or description provision on procurement, and we take a look at A110, and like you say, Kim, the A110 section is actually is still a section, is 215:40 to 48, but it's very vague. It's used word, for example, like to the maximum extent practicable, right, on the competition, or for written procedures when you use analysis of lease and purchase where appropriate. So it's little kind of, you know, vague, good feeling type of things. And we look at, so it's not like, you know, we have a lot, doing our single audit, we have a lot of findings that you know, procurement is an issue. Is basically that we want to ensure accountability and increase competition for all the use of federal fund. But if you take a look back at what are behind those procurement that we have now, I do want to acknowledge to you that this is new for college, university, and nonprofit. This is not something that they've seen before. This is more prescriptive. It is more, you know, you fit into the bucket in terms of, so now you have, you know, the 5 type of procurement. You know, you have the micro purchases, the small micro purchase, the small purchase, and you have the sole sealed bids, and you have the other sealed bid. What's the other one, Victoria?
You got small purchases, micro purchases.
Competitive, and then the sole source. So you basically have the 5 things, but they are very prescriptive in terms of the type of procurement that you're going to have. But if you take a look at, you know, what the underlining of it, though, is you basically have the same type of things. And actually, I do have a bear clause that I want to show you to
Now,
you.
this always makes me want to run for
Yeah.
a bite of pastry.
Yeah, see, this is actually,
Oh, no.
this is actually the back clause that, I kind of designed for the procurement. And if you take a look at this back clause, this is the official back clause. If you take a look at this middle here, that whole all type of
Yes.
procurement, you will see that the 5 main criteria that was in A110 are also now, in the uniform guideline. And you have to have, of course, anything that, you procure with federal fund have to comply with all this, the general criteria. And that is, you have to have a document policy, your procurement policy have to be documented, your purchase have to be necessary. All right, how are you gonna make sure that that's the case? Full and open competition is another criteria. No conflict of interest, then you have to have a conflict of interest policy in place. And then documentation. So if you have the general provision here, that's what I intend. And the other thing, there's only 5 types now. You didn't differentiate in A110, but now you have 5 types of procurement. The micro purchase, which are anything that less than $3,000. The small purchase, anything less than $150,000. And you have the sealed bid, competitive proposal, and you have the little pinky sole source. So basically, it is different. Something that state and local have to comply about in the past, and now we think that to ensure accountabilities, ensure increased competition, we want to have to uniformly to all grantees.
And I think the state, local, and tribal governments had a sigh of relief because this is very familiar to them.
Yes.
That it didn't change for them.
I will say, and Gil and Victoria know this, that there was a great deal of concern that this might be the single most expensive part in terms of dollars to implement in the uniform guidance on the university side. Now, some of our questions you have addressed in the recent set of FAQs. I'm not sure that everyone has had a chance to digest those yet, so I thought we might talk about
Sure.
some specific issues. I was tempted to we've been meeting with our purchasing department at Wisconsin over the last 3 months to go through those purchasing requirements and look at them against our current purchasing policy to see where are their fits and where are their gaps. And we have now discussed the entire segment, and we are down to a page of 32 pages of questions. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them here, but I thought we might talk about some of the ones that were really
Sure.
a change for us. And one of those is the introduction of the term conditional title. Because that sounds as though now when we purchase a piece of equipment on a federal award, we might not actually own title. Is that the case?
That is not the case.
Oh,
So let me differentiate a little bit of your question and procurement. I think your question is more on
The property side.
The property side. And I would like to say that on the property side, we did not change much. So what you are familiar with A110 on equipment, the property, how to, you need to buy you need to buy the necessary thing. You don't have a duplication. You need to screen, the equipment, beforehand for any duplication. Those are pretty much the same. So you should not see any big difference between the equipment and property management that you see in A110, to the uniform guidance. That's not the case in procurement. I think we already established that. That's, the procurement standards are now much different from the A110. So the conditional title, no, is basically the title still going to be vested with, when you buy an equipment with federal fund, the title still going to be vested with university or nonprofit or tribals and state and local. The condition is basically that there are conditions that if you're going to buy, you have to have proper records of it. And at the end, they still have a proper disposal requirement that you have to go through. That's the condition that we want you to just be aware of. It's nothing else tied to it.
So basically, we do own the property once
Yes.
we purchase it, as long as we adhere to the basic standards.
Yeah, and
For
those
property
and that's
purchases.
why the adjective conditional title.
Okay.
Yeah.
While we're still on property, There was language in there that baffled us initially because it talked about, in our record-keeping systems, being able to document the percentage of federal participation in the project costs
Right.
rather than in the purchase cost of the equipment. That sounded like a lot of reprogramming of our purchasing property system.
That's another clarification that I think we made in our FAQ, that there should be no change in your equipment system to maintain that property records.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, skip over now to procurement, because
Yeah.
you did mention micro purchases.
Yeah.
Another new term, and this one is perhaps the most troubling for us on the university side. Most of us, many years ago, went through and changed our equipment definition to meet the federal standard of $5,000 in a useful life of 1 year. And when we changed our equipment definition, we also made changes in our purchasing policy. So that, and I use Wisconsin only as an example, but I believe this is the most common example, that our procurement card purchases allow those purchases up to $5,000.
Right.
Now with the concept of micro purchase, which requires no competitive bidding of really any sort, at the $3,000 limit, does that mean I now need to start documenting purchases between the $3,000 and $5,000 cap?
So basically, yes, you are
This
correct.
sounds like a lot of work, Gil.
You definitely are correct in terms of the micro purchase is at the level of $3,000. But I want to address you the micro purchase again, because if you take a look at the micro purchase, it's $3,000 or less. You need no quotation,
Right.
And the only thing that we encourage, and this is a should situation here, not a must. The thing is, you should make sure there's equitable distribution. So if you buy $2,000 of pencil, from Office Depot 1 year, we encourage you to take a look at what your university offer, the next year's or the year after that, maybe staple. So we encourage you to do that. So no quotation, and encourage some equitable distribution. The reason, and we did think about that. COFAR did think about the $5,000. That's because that was a lot of comment that we received from college university. Unfortunately, we want to tie it back, the $3,000 and the $150,000 for more threshold to what is current in the FARs. So that's where it comes up.
Why don't we tie the FARs to the uniform guidance?
That
Did
would be
we talk
another.
about that?
I think actually, Gil, do you want to talk too a little bit about the small purchase threshold? Because I
Yeah.
think to Kim's question about do you have to change your charge card threshold, it might be good to highlight some of those flexibilities that go all the way up to $150,000 as well.
Yes, I think that's the good point. Thanks, Victoria. And the small purchase, I want to remind everybody again, because a lot of universities came up to us again and say, wait a minute, 150, we got to get the cost analysis, we got to get the price analysis, we have to document, we have to go after RP. No, the up to $150,000 for small purchase, the only thing you need is rate quotation. And even the uniform guidance didn't say that you need 3 or 4 or 5. We just say more than 1, so you can actually have 2. And those 2 price quotation can be from anywhere. You can get a quotation from searching on the net. You just need to document that, though, that you get a price quotation from there. And there is no cost or price analysis. That is reserved for the sealed bid and competitive proposal. These two guys over here. And the bigger purchase, that you need, cost proposal, cost or price analysis. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we have in the uniform guidance in describing small purchase, we say that this type of purchase should be relatively simple and informal. So that's the whole concept about the small purchase.
And I love those words, but I do want to just reference back to our friends in the audit community. Again,
Right here.
excusing,
Tasha.
no, Tasha's not going to come in and audit us, I hope. And the need for a control environment, for some standards of documentation. And so I will tell you that at Wisconsin, we felt sort of a double whammy on this, because it is going to require some way to manage documenting purchases between $3,000 and $5,000 that we do not currently have in place. So either that has to be the principal investigator or someone on his staff who's making the purchase, or I have to have purchasing agents who can do that. And frankly, I don't think we have the capacity to put this in the purchasing office, so we have to manage that. But the second part of it is, even though you have given us flexibility up to the simplified acquisition threshold, we are an entity of the state, and so we are subject to all of those rules at the $50,000 level. So on that end, we're probably very strong because the focus is on high dollar purchases. But now we're going to be adding what we see as a new emphasis on those lower dollar purchases, many of which will not even be in our inventory systems. Do I sound
and
like
I
I'm
think-
whining?
No, maybe a little.
Thank you. No.
I think that's a very good observation, and I think that, when we took a look at these procurement definitions, and for those that were following kind of the common rule A102 language before, there are a few people that I think can take this as an opportunity to change some of their procurement requirements under that small purchase requirement and increase the level of documentation that it requires for sealed bids or competitive proposals.
Yeah.
Because in the auditees that we audit, like you, a lot of them are at a much lower dollar amount, and
Yes.
recognizing that, the governing bodies generally are establishing kind of what that level is, that there is more flexibility built into that, and it may be a broader issue to be looking at, should we be reevaluating kind of what the small purchase threshold is at each of our individual governments or entities.
Okay. Could I go back to something you referenced
Yes.
also on the procurement side? And that is, we initially had some concerns, Gil, that most of us in large universities are in fact part of consortia arrangements
right.
for purchasing so that we can maximize our buying scope in order to get better pricing. So we think of that as strategic sourcing, and we've been doing a lot of work on that on the university side. So that means that there was indeed competition for the price of pencils and toner and all of those things that are commonly purchased. But it is not associated with that immediate purchase. Is strategic sourcing going to be out the door?
No, definitely not. I think that strategic sourcing and sole sourcing procurement as well are definitely going to be allowable. And if you take a look at the section 318 in the guidance, we encourage efficient purchasing. So what you're doing there is basically more strategically, to make sure that you get the best purchase out there. So it's going to be no problem. I don't think.
Those strategic sources will consider to have been through
Yes.
a competitive process.
Yep.
And
Okay.
just to even add a little bit of emphasis on that note, the guidance actually encourages non-federal entities to have procurement policies and procedures that lead to the most efficient procurement for the federal government with those federal dollars. So it's in the federal government's best interest for non-federal entities to have purchases that are done efficiently, whether that means bulking them together or spreading them out. Shared service agreements among different campuses or entities within a consortia are encouraged, as well as those strategic sourcing agreements where the competition is there at that higher level, but then within that strategic sourcing arrangement, the purchasing can be done much more quickly.
Great. That's good news for all of us, because as we all know, that there's a great deal of pressure on funding, not just from federal awards, but from all sources. So we're trying to stretch that dollar as far as possible.
And I think there's a little bit of other good news that Gil might be willing to talk to us about. When we had a conversation earlier, we were talking about how the procurement standards apply to purchases that are ultimately charged to an indirect cost pool.
Yes.
And whether the procurement standards apply to those purchases, Gil?
Okay, so basically, yes, that question come up a lot because, not only you have procurement that, get charged directly to federal, to federal fundings, and then those are kind of flow through your building and maintenance or operations or your admin. And as you can see in the FAQ that we put out right before Labor Day, our answer is no. The procurement standard that you see here do not apply to any charge that not directly charged to the fair projects. So I think the example that we gave in the FAQ is a good one. It's basically if you have a contract to maintain, clean the building, right? Yeah, that you have negotiated in the past, and that contract is $1 million, for the whole years. Is going to eventually get into the computation of O&M for the operation maintenance on the indirect costs. Those do not have to follow the BAR clause at all.
That's great news.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate that.
All right.
So could we go back to sole sourcing?
Yes.
Sole sourcing was,
That's,
The last
this might be
question
the
on
last one, okay.
And then
It
you
was
can-
already very difficult, but
Yeah.
now, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we can get it done
okay.
with the prior approval requirement. Would you talk about it?
Okay, so the sole source is, one thing we want to clarify is the sole source is at all level. So it's not just a sole source, for the small purchase. The sole source can be applied to any. We have $1 million purchase. If you fit those 4 criteria here, then the sole source is available, right? So basically, if you get into the situation that your purchase is unique, only one provider, can provide you this type of thing for your research, then, it's okay. And if it's a public emergency, there's an emergency to do that. You need to buy something to finish up, or your test on, for example, Ebola. That's in the heart of
Yes.
things now. Then you just go ahead and do it. The third thing is if authorized by agency. If your agency, they say, hey, we need this next week, not next month, and your agency allowed it, then it's fine as well. And the one more thing, though, the pass-through entity can declare that, your purchase can be sole source as well. So for the sub-award, they can look up to the state, for example, who gave them, the award, say, okay, can we buy this from this source because we need it? Then they can give authorization. And the fourth thing is no competition. Is in rural somewhere, and this is the only vendors that can provide you this type of service or product, then that sole source is allowed as well.
Great, thank you.
You
All
want to
right.
talk about the grace period?
Oh, yes, I think that's one last thing worth mentioning.
That would be great.
We're going to end on a good note.
Let's do
Okay,
that.
Okay. So.
Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, one of the things that, we want to point out that in our FAQ as well is we do hear from nonprofit, we do hear from university that these are new requirements. These are things that you say 30 pages or something like that?
32 pages.
32 pages that, is kind of lined up, don't line up,
Right.
that line up to what you had before. So what we have, and we want to let everybody knows that we do have in the FAQ grace period to implement this provision. And it's basically 1 full year. So let me illustrate that. If your institution fiscal year is end on June 30 of 2015,
Yes,
the grace period is 7/1/15 to 6/30/16. So the first time that you have to implement the procurement standard is going to be basically for your fiscal year 17.
that's great news, because we think it might take that long. But if I could just add, I'm sure we can also continue the discussion about some of these questions
Sure.
regarding procurement. I'll send you my list.
Oh,
Absolutely. And Kim, thank
No,
you
I won't.
for closing on that note, because I think we absolutely do want to continue this dialogue beyond today. And so thank you for kicking it off, and it will be an ongoing conversation going forward. Absolutely.